fine pornography to jerk off to, and half a morbid fascination with our grandfather. Nearly every day we made new and grotesque discoveries. I wasn't very tall, but if I balanced carefully on my grandfather's wooden chair, I could reach into the space between the mirror and the ceiling. There I found a stack of black and white bestiality pictures. They weren't from magazines, just individually numbered photographs that looked like they had been hand-picked from a mail-order catalog. There were early 70s photos of women straddling giant horse dicks and sucking pigs' dicks, which looked like soft, fleshy corkscrews. I had seen Playboy and Penthouse before, but these photographs were in another class altogether. It wasn't just that they were obscene. They were surreal. All the women were beaming real, innocent flower child smiles as they sucked and fucked these animals. There were also fetish magazines like Water Sports and Black Beauty stashed behind the mirror. Instead of stealing a whole magazine, we would take a razor blade and carefully cut out certain pages. Then we'd fold them into tiny squares and hide them underneath the large white rocks that framed my grandmother's gravel driveway. Years later, we went back to find them, and they were still there, but frayed, deteriorated, and covered with earthworms and slugs. One afternoon in the fall, as Chad and I sat around my grandmother's dining room table after a particularly uneventful day at school, we resolved to find out what was inside the locked workbench drawer. Always hell-bent on stuffing her brood with food, my grandmother, Beatrice, was force-feeding us meatloaf and Jell-O, which was mostly water. She came from a rich family and had tons of money in the bank, but she was so cheap that she'd try to make a single Jell-O package last for months. She used to wear knee-high hose rolled down around her ankles and odd gray wigs that obviously didn't fit. People always told me I resembled her because we were both skinny with the same narrow facial structure. Nothing in the kitchen had changed as long as I'd been eating her inedible food there. Above the table hung a yellowing picture of the Pope in a cheap brass frame. An imposing-looking family tree tracing the Warners back to Poland and Germany, where they were called the Wanamaker's, was plastered on the wall nearby. And crowning it all was a large, hollow wooden crucifix with a gold Jesus on top, a dead palm leaf wrapped around it, and a sliding top that concealed a candle and a vial of holy water. Under the kitchen table there was a heating vent that led to the workbench in the cellar. Through it, we could hear my grandfather coughing and hacking down there. He had his CB radio on, but he never talked into it. He just listened. He had been hospitalized with throat cancer when I was very young, and for as long as I could remember, I never heard his actual voice, just the jagged wheezing that he forced through his tracheostomy. We waited until we heard him leave the cellar, abandon our meatloaf, poured our Jell-O into the heating vent, and ventured downstairs. We could hear our grandmother calling futilely after us, "Chad, Brian, clean the rest of your plates." We were lucky all she did was yell that afternoon. Typically, if she caught us stealing food, talking back, or goofing off, we were forced to kneel on a broomstick in the kitchen for anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, which resulted in perpetually bruised and scabbed knees. Chad and I worked quickly and quietly. We knew what had to be done. Picking a rusted screwdriver off the floor, we pried the workbench drawer open wide enough so we could peek in. The first thing we saw was cellophane, tons of it, wound around something. We couldn't make out what it was. Chad pushed the screwdriver deeper into the drawer. There was hair and lace. He wedged the screwdriver further, and I pulled until the drawer gave way. What we discovered were bustiers, bras, slips, and panties, and several tangled women's wigs with stiff mottled hair. We began unwrapping the cellophane, but as soon as we saw what it concealed, we dropped the package to the floor. Neither of us wanted to touch it. It was a collection of dildos that had suction cups on the bottom. Maybe it was because I was so young, but they seemed enormous. And they were covered with a hardened dark orange slime, like the gelatinous crust that builds up around a turkey when it is cooked. We later deduced that it was aged Vaseline. I made Chad wrap the dildos up and put them back in the drawer. We'd done enough exploring for the day. Just as we were trying to force the drawer shut, the cellar doorknob turned. Chad and I froze for a moment. Then he grabbed my hand and dove under a plywood table that my grandfather had his toy train set up on.